All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started here in just a second. As we go through, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A part of Zoom to send those questions in. Depending on what the question is, I will try to answer it for you as we go through, or I will save it for the end of the presentation. So today's presentation is on our Wi-Fi access points. We've got a lot of different models, many of them very similar to each other. So I thought it'd be a good idea to start doing a semi-monthly webinar just to sort of give an overview of all the different access points we have and sort of try to explain what some of the differences are for the different models. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll start talking about just some general things on our design philosophy and some of the technology in our access points. So one of the things we're big on here is this sort of RF first by design. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort tweaking our Wi-Fi performance to make it work really good. And one of the main things we do differently is we do not mount our antennas directly to the same PCBA as the rest of our components. And the reason for that is EMI issues. So by moving the antennas to their own separate board off the main PCBA, and having some oftentimes shielding between the two boards, that's just done to create greater isolation on those antennas. It makes very little difference when it comes to people who have strong signals. Where the difference comes in is on those edge case issues where you've got somebody and the signal from their device is just barely making it back to the access point. The little bit better of isolation on those antennas will help that user much more than your other users. Hold on. Okay, just getting a note that someone's using AI to take notes. That's fine. Um, so that's something we do differently than the others. Even some of the more expensive access points out there, I've opened up some $1,500 access points, and they've got their antennas directly on the main PCBA. The other thing that we do a little bit differently is we add in shielding. Um, for 4G and 5G interference. And the reason for that is 4G and 5G oftentimes are operating on frequencies that butt right up next to your Wi-Fi frequencies. And there can be bleed over, especially when you're deploying Wi-Fi in a building that is using DAS to broadcast 4G or 5G signals inside the building. So, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, cellular signals have a hard time penetrating buildings, especially if they're covered in glass with metal reflectiveness added to them. So, what happens is on these big buildings is they put some antennas up on the roof, pull the signal in from there, and then they rebroadcast it in the building using what are essentially cellular access points. And oftentimes in these buildings, you're using the exact same cable drops for both your Wi-Fi access points and your cellular access points. And so because of that, you end up with cellular access points and Wi-Fi access points very close to each other where you can have some of these bleed over issues causing interference. So that extra filtering we do helps protect for that as well. And then also, just when it comes to the design philosophy on our hardware, we put a lot of time and effort into mitigating issues that would oftentimes lead to failure of solid state components. So, for instance, we do not use any electrolytic capacitors. Everything we are using are solid state capacitors. We also put a lot of time and effort into dealing with heat issues, making sure that we are drawing heat off the board components and being able to vent that heat out. If you look at some of our cheaper competition, especially those with shorter warranties, you will find that many of them don't even have vent holes, let alone any sort of heat sink to pull heat off of the components. And so that allows us to offer lifetime warranties on all of our true business class access points, even those that are just costing you 110 bucks. So that is it for this slide. There we go. Some of the other technologies you will find in our access points, all of our access points support our Nebula Smart Mesh technology. All of our Wi-Fi 7 and Wi-Fi 6 products support WPA3, WPA2. And if you're using our business class access points, full WPA enterprise support. We support 802.11k V and R for roaming, all the things you would expect to find in a business class access point. So something we do that no one else does is this thing called a dual optimized antenna. So your traditional access points, including the majority of our access points, are optimized with the idea that you're going to mount your access point on the ceiling directly above the area that needs coverage. So the antennas are optimized to radiate the signal outward and slightly downwards from that access point to maximize coverage. Unfortunately, in the real world, you oftentimes end up having to mount access points to a wall, so they're now rotated 90 degrees from where the access points antennas have been optimized for. So you end up sending a lot of signal up into the ceiling, down into the floor, where it's lost or causes interference with access points on those other floors. So our solution to this is called dual optimized antennas. So those are going to be any of our W series access points that end with the letter D. And we give you two sets of antennas, your traditional ceiling mount antennas and then antennas that are optimized for wall placement. And then we let you choose which antennas you want to use on a per AP basis. The other technology we have is our smart antenna technology. This is something we've been offering for at least 15 years. Um, it's similar. If you're not familiar with it, it's similar to Ruckus's BeamFlex Plus. So if you're familiar with the benefits of that, it's going to be very similar. And basically, what it does is it's a technology that's designed to increase capacity. So it allows you to have more users on the same access point. It reduces interference, so it's really good in tough RF environments, whether that means there's a lot of APs in a small area or there's something else in the environment which makes RF difficult, um, and helps increase the coverage area for the access point. So if you're dealing with any of those types of situations, basically anywhere where you've got a tough RF environment, smart antenna makes a huge difference. And the way it works, let's skip through this, is that instead of having one antenna pattern or two antenna patterns, we have hundreds of antenna patterns. And the access point is smart and it's able to choose the best antenna patterns for the environment. So our algorithm looks at where the client is in relationship to the access point and chooses a beam pattern that's going to optimize for that. But we also take into account sources of RF interference. Um, so when we're choosing that antenna pattern, we also try to choose an antenna pattern that ignores sources of interference. So because of that, I don't have the slides in today's presentation, but we do sometimes cover it in our Wi-Fi 101 presentation. We've done tests using basically the same access point in a hospitality environment. Um, one version of the AP with smart antenna, one with your traditional antennas, and it makes a gigantic difference in performance. It allows us to achieve across multiple APs greater than 100% airtime utilization. It shares the available airtime much more evenly between access points, makes a huge difference. So if you're doing something where you've got a lot of access points or a lot of users, smart antenna makes a huge difference. And then all of our modern access points are using some variation of this multi-mounting bracket. Basically, it's a bracket that you're going to mount to your ceiling or your wall. It's got drill holes in there, allowing you to connect it to an outlet box or a junction box. So giving you a lot of flexibility about where you mount this bracket, and then the access point itself just snaps into it. We also offer as an optional attachment, a very affordable optional attachment, are these clips here. So these clips allow you or snap to the T-bar that holds up a drop ceiling like you would find in a typical office. Then this screws into those, and then the access point snaps into that. So it makes it very easy to mount these on a drop ceiling without needing to poke any holes in the drop ceiling material itself, other than to allow the Ethernet cable through. Okay, so that's it as far as just sort of general guidance as to, some of the stuff that's going on. So now we'll talk about some of the different models. And we'll start by talking about Wi-Fi 6, although much of what I'm talking about now will also carry over to Wi-Fi 7. So we basically break our access points up into three sections. Um, We've chosen to call them simplicity, flexibility, and ultimate. So simplicity is our Soho access points. So I don't consider these our true business class access points, although obviously there are plenty of occasions where you will use these for business customers. But generally, these have a 2-year warranty instead of our traditional lifetime warranty. And they're going to be missing some features you would traditionally find in a business class access point. As an example here, it doesn't have captive portal, may not have load balancing, things like that. The flexibility series here is our sort of true business class entry level access point. So lifetime warranty, the full Nebula feature set. And then the Ultimate series is our W series here, um, which gives you things like the dual optimized antenna, access to smart antenna, and also more importantly, gives you access to a local controller. So if you need coordinated Wi-Fi deployments, but you don't want to use the Nebula Cloud for whatever reason, the W series supports um, a local controller. So to break it down, the Soho type or prosumer type access points, those are our NWA series that start with basically a number under 100. So 50, 90 series, and soon to be the 30 series. Then when it comes to our business class access points, those are going to be the NWA series that are at least 100. So NWA 110, NWA 240, etc. And then our ultimate series, we can kind of just ignore the numbers, but anything that starts with the letter W is part of the ultimate series. So we do have a slide here sort of summarizing the differences here between those. So you can see here probably the area where there's the most confusion is between the 50 and the 90 series. So you can see here the 50 series, no MAC authentication, no radius authentication, no captive portal, no layer 2 isolation, but those are in the 90 series. And then the 100 series here adds things like dynamic pre-shared key, access to our CNP security services, auto optimization, SNMP, etc. So on the Wi-Fi 6 side of things here, we've got 4 different models for you. So we've got an NWA50AX, an NWA50AX Pro, a 90AX Pro, and an NWA55AXE. So the NWA55AXE is our cheapest outdoor access point that we have available for you. And then the difference between the NWA50AX and the AX Pro is the AX Pro has a multi-gig, a 2.5 gig Ethernet port, and it supports the wider channel. What is it? 160 megahertz channels, is that right? Where this one does not. So they're both a 2x2 as far as the antenna configuration, but the 50 maxes out at a speed of AX 1800, where the 50 Pro can achieve AX 3000. So when it comes to outdoors, in addition to that NWA 55AXE, we also offer a WAX 655E, which is our super heavy duty outdoor access point. It's got external antennas, which you have to buy separately. It's IP66 rated. It can handle temperatures down to negative 40 degrees. And then we also do offer here a accessory that can convert your access point into an outdoor access point, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later on. So now we'll go on to our Wi-Fi 7 access points. So the first thing I want to talk about is our band flex APs. So as I'm sure you're all aware, one of the key benefits of Wi-Fi 7 has been the addition of 6 gigahertz support, because 6 gigahertz offers up a ton of available spectrum for you so you can deploy more access points or more devices before you start stepping on each other's toes as far as RF interference goes. But that raises your cost, right? So you've got 3 radios. You've got a 2.4 radio, a 5 gigahertz radio, and a 6 gigahertz radio. They all need amplifiers. They all need their own antennas. And then you need a CPU in there, which is powerful enough to not bottleneck your radios when you've got all 3 devices connected to all 3 and maxing out your performance. So because of that, there's 2 issues. One is tri-band Wi-Fi 7 access points are going to be more expensive because you have to cover all those additional hardware expenses. And also, your tri-band access points tend to use a lot of PoE power to the point where, especially at the faster speeds, you cannot use your standard 802.3 AT PoE to power up the access point. You have to go up to BT power, which is the 60-watt PoE, and those switches, so now you're having to swap out your switches. You can't use your existing switches if you want maximum performance. And those BT switches tend to be expensive. And of course, you've got three radios going with lots of speed. So you probably want multi-gig switches on top of that. So what we have found is that, a lot of you out there don't need all three radios. So that's where our band flex comes in. And as far as I know, we are the only vendor operating or offering band flex. So most of our competition for these lower end Wi-Fi 7 access points is giving you a dual radio access point that only supports 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So it's still Wi-Fi 7, but it doesn't support 6 gigahertz. What band flex does is it gives you two radios. One of those radios is a 2.4 gigahertz radio. The other radio is either a 5 gigahertz or a 6 gigahertz. So it's user selectable. So the benefit of that is right now there's not a lot of devices out there that support 6 gigahertz on the client side. It's still primarily your higher end phones, although it is coming down to some of the cheaper phones now. But still, a lot of the new laptops coming out, a lot of especially your smart home devices don't support 6 gigahertz at all. So what we do is we let you do like our competition, and you can use 2.4 and 5 gigahertz now to support your legacy devices. But at that point where 6 gigahertz becomes much more ubiquitous, you simply go into the software and you flip it, and that 5 gigahertz radio is now a 6 gigahertz radio. Um, so that is what band flex stands for, is the ability to be flexible on whether you are supporting 5 or 6 gigahertz. So we'll go through here some of our lower end models, just like we had the NWA 50 and 90 series on the AX access points. We have the same thing here on our Wi-Fi 7 or BE access points. So there's a 50 and a 90 series. There is a standard version and a pro version. So what is the difference between the standard and the pro when it comes to these access points? And the only difference here is the pro models support the band flex. So the pro models support 6 gigahertz if you want it, whereas the non-pro versions are only 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. Everything else is the same. So now we'll move on from those and start talking a little bit about our higher end business class access points. And you will see here that I've got two model numbers listed up here at the top. We've got an NWA 110BE and a WBE 510DE. And the reason I have done this is from a hardware perspective, they're basically the same access point. There may be some memory differences between the two, but otherwise it's basically the same from a hardware perspective. So this is an access point here. It is a BE 6500 class product. It is band flex. So again, one dedicated 2.4 radio and one radio that supports either 5 or 6 gigahertz for you. It has our cellular filtering technology built into it, supports MLO. The only difference from a hardware perspective between the NWA 110BE and the WBE 510D is that the 510D, that D is telling you there that it has the dual optimized antenna built in, whereas the NWA 110BE does not. But otherwise, these are basically the same hardware. And again, there may be some memory issues as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, just to support some of the other software features. So let's talk about the software features. We had that slide earlier, but just as a refresher, the WBE series, or the W series, let's call it the W series, it supports the ability to support a local controller. It also has the ability to do coordination with one of our firewall gateways. So if you're looking for a local controller, the W series is what you want. If you're looking to do something here like collaborative detection and response, where the access point works in conjunction with our security router to provide greater security services, that's only in the W series. And then the other thing the W series allows is the ability to do GRE tunneling from the access point back to the controller, including our secure Wi-Fi technology, which allows you to turn an access point into a cloud-managed VPN appliance. So that's why I'm saying I think the W version may have more memory because it needs to support all those additional software features. But otherwise, the hardware is basically the same except for the antenna. One thing you will notice here is all of our new access points use a USB-C PD port for providing a quote unquote AC power. So, most of you are going to be using PoE, so you don't need to worry about that. But we do occasionally get people that say, I'm not using PoE, I need an AC adapter. So rather than, going through the game of trying to find an AC adapter with the right barrel plug, um, you can use any USB-C PD um, power brick with a standard USB-C power cable to power up any of our new access points. So we already talked about the differences here on the dual optimized antenna. We'll just jump through those slides here. So the next pair of models to talk about is the NWA 210BE and the WBE 630S. Again, basically the same hardware here for us. Did I miss a slide? There we go. Sorry, my bad. So this is a still a dual radio band flex access point, although it's a much faster one. This is a BE 12300, so almost double the speed of the other models we've been talking about. Um, and then the difference between the NWA version and the WBE 630S is the S. The S is telling you that the W version here has smart antenna technology built in, while the NWA 210BE is just your standard static ceiling mount antenna design. And then, of course, all of the features we just talked about in the last model, software-wise, of what the differences are between the W series and the NWA series. Now, this one does have another little difference here compared to the previous models we were looking at, and this has dual Ethernet ports. So one Ethernet port is in, the second Ethernet port is a data pass-through port. So, you can save yourself from running as much cable. You can run one cable to the access point, and then run another cable out from the access point to another port or device in the same area, or use it as sort of an Ethernet extender if you need to. But that second port does not support PoE. So there's no PoE going out of that second port. It's only PoE going into the main port to power the AP. So we've already talked about these smart antenna slides, so I won't sit here and go through all of it again. So next up from there are our tri-radio APs. So these are the access points that have 3 radios built in, all operating at the same time. So you are supporting clients on 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz all simultaneously. So to start with, at the entry level, we have the NWA 130BE and the WBE 530. You will notice there is not a D or S on the end of the W series model here. So that means they both have the standard ceiling mount antenna. So the primary difference here is just those software differences we've talked about earlier between the W and the NWA series. And then we've got, whoops, it's auto advancing again. We've got our WBE 660S, and the slide will not stay up there for me. Sorry about that. This is our first ever Wi-Fi 7 access point. We were the first ones in North America to actually be shipping a Wi-Fi 7 business class access point. And it is still our flagship model to this point. It is our most powerful guy. So if you're looking for maximum performance, this is who you want. So this supports BE 22,000 speeds. So in theory, up over 20 gigabits per second data rates on your Wi-Fi 7 clients. It is tri-radio. Now this guy here does require BT power to power it up, or a USB-C adapter to power it up, or we also sell PoE injectors that have enough power to support this. Because of how fast the wireless side of things are, it's got a 10 gigabit Ethernet port on it. And something that, and it also includes Bluetooth. So if you are doing Bluetooth low energy applications, this is our only access point currently that supports that. And then probably the biggest difference you will notice if you see one of these in person is the back housing here is metal. And the reason for that is because this puts off a lot of heat. So we've turned the back housing into a heat sink essentially for the access point itself. So all the heat goes directly into this, and this is exposed directly to the air. But it still has basically the same type of mounting bracket as I showed you earlier. It's just, changed differently to fit around the fins here on the heat sink. So that is it as far as our current models. I do have a new model I want to share with you, and we'll get to it in just a second. Before I get there, I do want to talk about our accessories a little bit more that we offer on the access points. So we already showed it earlier. We do make a outdoor enclosure and a outdoor pole mount. These are two separate SKUs. The outdoor enclosure can be mounted directly to a wall, where if you need a pole mount, then you can buy that separately. And let's see, it looks like a question came in. Okay, Brett, I will get to your question here in just a second. So it is UV stabilized, so it's perfectly fine in the sun. It's not going to become brittle and fall apart very quickly. And it adds a little extra water protection to the access points, so they are safe from rain and stuff like that. It also gives the access points a slightly better temperature range, operating range that they can operate in outdoors. So we've got two versions of this SKU these days. One is a smaller version for our smaller access points, and the other is a larger version, which fits most of our new Wi-Fi 7 access points. So those are both available for you if you're looking to do outdoor Wi-Fi, which does, let's talk about it here. So one of the questions is when are you guys going to have a Wi-Fi 7 outdoor access point? And the answer to that is soon, but not yet. So this is a way to get around that. If you need to offer Wi-Fi 7 outdoors, you can use one of these enclosures with one of our indoor Wi-Fi 7 access points to provide that outdoor Wi-Fi 7 coverage. Now, I do want to remind you that in the US, by FCC rules, 6 gigahertz cannot be used outdoors unless the access point has a GPS and the ability to communicate with what's called an ACS. So basically, to use 6 gigahertz outdoors legally, the access point has to know where it is physically located. It then periodically goes out onto the internet and checks to see what other licensed users may be in the area. And then that tells the access point what channels and what powers it can use. So that is required for doing 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi 7 outdoors. So you're perfectly fine, though, to deploy 2.4 and 5 gigahertz access points outdoors, even though they're on their Wi-Fi 7. But you'd be a naughty boy if you deployed 6 gigahertz outdoors using one of our indoor access points. So while you can do it, you shouldn't. And we do not endorse that. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we do sell packages here, which include these clips for doing the T-bar mounting to make it easier for you to deploy and mount access points to drop ceilings without needing to poke holes in them. So those are available for you. And now on to our new access point. So we have a new access point. It has been skewed up at D&H, and it should be available at all of our other distributors by the end of next week, and it should be able to ship by the end of next week. So this is our new NWA 30BE. So the NWA 30 is telling you it's a sub 100 NWA series. So this is a Soho class access point. So it's a 2-year warranty, and it is missing some of those business class features. This has specifically been designed as a desktop mount. So you will notice it has external antennas because people are going to be sitting this on a table or bookcase or something like that. And it may not always be perfectly flat. So this gives us the vertical antenna pattern here to get better coverage for a desktop mount. It does mesh with our other access points, so it can be used as part of a smart mesh. And a key thing with this guy here is no PoE. It is only powered directly through a wall plug of some sort. So this is the new guy here that's available. I'm not sure, how many people are chomping at the bit for something like this, but it is available. It is Wi-Fi 7. It is BE 5100. So it supports just 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, no 6 gigahertz support on it. And that ends today's presentation. So Brent had a question here, which was how many simultaneous clients can the WBE 660S support? Off the top of my head, I want to say it's 512. I would need to look that up to support it. But this gets into one of the topics that we cover in the Wi-Fi 101 webinar. And that is that as a general rule, you're never going to be able to get as many clients onto an access point as what you see on the data sheet. And the reason for that has to do with airtime utilization. Basically, with Wi-Fi, with some exceptions for MuMaimo, but just to keep it simple, basically with Wi-Fi, each device has to take turns broadcasting. So one device broadcasts, then the next device broadcasts, then the next device broadcasts. Um, and so in a real world environment where you've got actual active users, you're going to basically max out your airtime utilization long before you get to whatever the maximum number of clients is on the access points data sheet. So, I mean, technically, if your clients aren't doing anything, they're just sitting there occasionally, letting the access point know they're still connected, you can probably hit it. But when you actually are passing traffic through, you're gonna get to the point where you've got too many clients on the access point for anybody to be happy with the quality of the connection. And that has nothing to do with the access point. It doesn't matter if you're using $100 access point or $1,000 access point. It's the airtime situation of the clients. There's just only so much airtime available that everyone has to share. So you're going to usually hit that limit long before you hit whatever the access point hardware limit is. And let's see, another question came in. James is asking, does the new NWA30BE use USB-C for power? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I have not actually physically handled one of these. I have a sample, but the sample doesn't have power. Let me check. I think I can check this real quick for you. Maybe. Um, it is not USB-C. It is a 12 volt barrel plug. So I'm guessing the reason for that is this is a rather low cost access point competing with a lot of really low cost access points aimed more at the home market. So those barrel plug wall wart type adapters are cheaper than a USB-C cable and a USB-C adapter still. So I'm assuming that's why they went that way. Another question here from Brent is, does the Wi-Fi 7 access point support 802.1x connections to solutions like Aruba ClearPass or Cisco ISE? So all of our 100 series and higher access points do support 802.1x. So whether you're talking about using, I'm assuming you're talking about using 802.1x for authenticating users using WPA Enterprise. So yes, we absolutely do. It's standard 802.1x. So as long as the device supports the standard, it should work. I'm not personally familiar with those specific, implementations from Aruba and Cisco, but yeah, it should be fine. Robert is asking, is there a table matrix that lists models on one axis versus features on the other? And the answer to that is yes, there is, and you can get it from your salesperson. I'm assuming if you're part of today's webinar, you are one of our reseller partners, so you probably have a salesperson assigned to you, Andy, David, Jacob, or Ivan. So they can get you one of these. Um, we're in the process over the next quarter or so of launching a bunch of new access points. So some of the newer models may not be on it, but most of them will be on there, and we will have an updated one here in the future, which lists sort of the new models as those become available. So yes, that is something we have, and that is something your sales guy can provide you a copy of. Um, so yeah, if there's any other questions, feel free to send those in. Well, I'm waiting to see if any more come in. Just want to highlight here for you, we do have user forums. You can find those at forum.zyxel.com. So that's where you can talk to other Zyxel installers and users. And unlike a lot of the other forums that are out there, this one is actually actively monitored by our product management and support team in Taiwan. They don't always wade in to answer questions on there, but they often do. It's also the first place where you will see security notifications, release notes, and things like that posted. So if you haven't checked it out, it's worth logging in and checking that out and taking a look at it. And then my email's up here on the screen. It's Sean R. with Sean spelled SHAWN. So Sean R at Zyxel.com. So if you have any other questions or feedback for me, you can just email me directly. Or, of course, you can always reach out to your salesperson and they can try to answer the question, or either get myself, Try, or Marcus involved if they don't know the answer to the question. So David's asking availability of WBE 630S in North America. Yeah, it's been available since I think May of this year. We definitely have stock in our US warehouse. So if you're trying to buy it through distribution and distribution doesn't have any stock, you can ask them to drop ship it or order it in for you. It is absolutely available for your distributor. I know there's a couple distributors out there that aren't carrying as much stock in hand as they used to. And sometimes you've got to remind your sales rep there that they have access to everything that's in our warehouse. So they can absolutely drop ship directly from our warehouse if they don't have stock in their warehouses. And I will stick around for another minute or two if someone's working on any other additional questions. But if not, thank you for joining us. I will be doing a Wi-Fi 101 webinar, I think next month in February. So I go into a lot more, not really our products, but I go into a lot more of the technology and the history of Wi-Fi and talk a little bit more about a lot of the common problems you run into in deploying Wi-Fi and why those problems are there and why many of those problems have never been solved or have only recently really been addressed with Wi-Fi 7. Um, so I'd love to see you at that. And then of course I always do a sort of every month I do a Nebula introduction. So if you haven't used Nebula, sort of a high level overview. And then every few months I also do a tips and tricks on Nebula where we go through some of the common mistakes people make when setting up Nebula and some of the features maybe people don't understand or tend to use more use incorrectly. So keep an eye for those. And thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar, and I hope I see you at one of our future webinars. Thank you.